Mike Hibbard, I've known you for probably getting on for 10 years through Jiu-Jitsu.
Yep.
Thank you for offering to come on the podcast. So
my pleasure.
Looking forward to having a bit of a chat and just talking about life experiences, maybe some of your struggles and where you are now and how you got there. So thanks, Mike. And maybe I'll just get you to tell us who you are.
Sure. Well, my name's Mike Hibbard. I'm a builder in Coffs Harbour, third generation builder. My grandfather started our family business after the Second World War. And I currently run it with my twin brother. And, I'm happy to say that in present time, I'm actually happy and married and got a great family. But, for a good 20 years of my life, that wasn't really the case. I actually decided to join JJ on this podcast when he first advertised for it, for the purposes of the fact that, I've been through alcohol, drugs, a little bit of petty crime. I'd lost family members, and pretty much went from 2 beach house mansions, 4 cars, down to a on the dole. So I've, if anyone was to say if anyone's seen or hit rock bottom, I've definitely hit rock bottom. But I think the positive thing is to say that no matter how low you go in life, you can take gradient steps to, find your self-respect and get back on your feet again. So that's really the whole story. If I was ever to write a book, I would actually call it the Silver Spoon Spiral. The reasons why I say Silver Spoon Spiral is because I actually I grew up in a very wealthy family, and fed with a silver spoon. And I guess as we kind of as I can kind of tell you my story, you'll find how the troubles of a rich kid with who grows up with finding no purpose can actually be as bad as a poor kid that has a purpose and is happy. There's a big difference there, which a lot of people don't really kind of understand. But at the same time, it certainly happened to me. And then eventually, when I actually started to clean my life up and even help people myself within a rehab and get off drugs, I found others that were kind of like me, that were kind of given everything and weren't really given a purpose or a game in life. And so they started to kind of mess their lives up just to create a game with drugs and alcohol, which was quite remarkable. So that's kind of like a bit of a overall 20-year kind of synopsis, if you like.
So Mike, you mentioned that when you were working in rehab, helping other people, you discovered all these other people with similar stories. Do you draw anything from that? Was there a common thread? Can you see any commonality in how you sort of ended up in the same place?
Yeah, the common denominator I found was that when, you know, as I'd cleaned up my own life and got to a point where I was I was competent enough to actually help others get off drugs within the time that I was working in the rehab. I found the common denominator being that it was a lot of people had they didn't really find what purpose they had, and it was more of more of action taking towards a certain goal or no goals at all, and you know, for them to have any kind of game in life. You know, I kind of say I do refer to you know, life as a bit of a game, and you know, to the degree where, you know, you've got your freedoms and you got your barriers, and I found that if people had too many barriers, well, they kind of tried to utilize drugs or alcohol to kind of not confront those barriers. And then if somebody had too much freedoms, which was more me on that side of the scale, and not enough barriers to kind of, like, you know, push through in life, you know, in came drugs and alcohol, you know, and it was very real. It was very real in different cultures, in different personalities, and being of such a high interest as an individual in others. You know, it's kind of like, even to the worst type of character, I think that made my job a lot easier, because I didn't look at them as any kind of scum or junkie or anything like that. They all had different personalities, you know, and I was very interested in that, you know, and in their human behavior. And I kind of look back at it, and, you know, where some people would get a little bit rattled, I'd kind of laugh, you know.
Yeah.
That just made my job easy, you know.
Yeah.
So that was really that was the common denominator that I saw, was that, you know, as soon as somebody started really using drugs and stopped playing sport, or they stopped doing something that they love to do, or they didn't have a passion to kind of, like, at least try out within, you know, to start with, you know, it was always an open door for drugs and alcohol. I mean, like, a lot of people go down the peer pressure line, JJ, but it's a little bit more to it than that, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I guess, you know, peer pressure works in different ways with different people, and like, you're not a little fella. I don't imagine you would have been intimidated into you know, doing anything or pushed around. So
no.
Yeah. So Mike, you said like a 20-year period of your life.
Yes.
So from what sort of age are you talking about?
Well, it sort of started where, see, I grew up I grew up a Christian, and you know, when you know, there's usually politics in kind of every type of group to a degree.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've got their moral codes, and they've got their you know, they've got their moral codes, their ethical codes, and so forth. And you know, once my mum and dad divorced, it was pretty much against one of the ethical codes, which was fair enough. You join a group, you agree to the policies that they've got. And so we were kind of like, you know, we were, I guess, excommunicated, which is the word that they used at the time, from the church.
Yeah.
Left with no ill will, but I mean, like, at the age of, like, when I was, I mean, that was at the age of 15. So to sleep in on a Sunday morning and not have to go to church, that was just bloody bliss, you know. That was fantastic. And I go back to the age of 15. Like, I'm 44 now.
Yeah.
But I know, I do believe that things, you know, the thing about the church is the Christian church is just the moral codes that they had. And you know, and the protectiveness of their fellowship, I guess. You know, it was a beautiful group to be a part of.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But there's a big bad world out there, you know. I'm not going into the peer pressure side, but I just kind of like, you know, it's amazing how little things can kind of come into your life where general society kind of make it okay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it was against my moral code. It was against my own personal integrity. You know, to kind of take drugs or even swear. You know, I had built, my parents and family around me had built such a great foundation.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to bring it down, and I mean a very long time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always looked up to, you know, like I'd done martial arts since I was 7.
Yeah.
You know, got a black belt in Taekwondo, did ninjutsu, kickboxing, Wing Chun Kung Fu. As you know, we both train jiu-jitsu now as the preferred martial arts. And so it's I kind of went more into those groups of martial arts, and also Arnold Schwarzenegger was another icon.
Yeah.
And so I'd be training at the gym, and the next thing you know, it was like I formed a new group of friends. You know, I'm fast forwarding from 15 to the age of 19, 20 years old.
Yep.
And then you know, and I was kind of wondering why I couldn't lift the weights, and I didn't look as ripped and cut as what my mates did. And at times, they actually looked better, and they actually lifted stronger than Arnie himself. You know what I mean? Like, now they weren't hitting stage. Like, if they were actually to perform on stage as well that Arnold Schwarzenegger did, just totally cream them, because that's a different type of genre of bodybuilding, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, you know, not getting into that. And so then I was introduced to the world of steroids.
Yep.
You know, and, you know, so here I'd made this definite goal that I wanted to, you know, to look like him, and I wanted to fight like Bruce Lee. So, you know, and this was the easy train to get there, you know. Competed in my first bodybuilding competition, took a truckload of steroids. I mean, like lots and lots of steroids. It's just, you know, and that was pretty much that wasn't influenced. It was more based on the fact that it's like, well, if you want this, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the starting point. And a lot of these guys were also bouncers at nightclubs, but I was only mates with them in the gym.
Yeah.
So, you know, I started lifting heavy, and I started looking really, really good. But my personality was dying, JJ. It was just going like this kind man that, you know, had a good foundation, a good Christian background.
Yeah.
Started to get very arrogant and egotistic. I was already, you know, I was married at a young age, and I had a son, and they didn't exist outside the world of bodybuilding and, you know, and all the steroids I could get my hands on to take to look good and lift heavy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, and next thing you know, I'm actually out at the nightclubs with my mates who I'd sort of formed a really good crew with.
Yeah.
And in comes the cocaine and the ecstasy.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, you know, and then pretty much it all just spiraled down from there. So coming from a wealthy home and building 2 homes, getting married, having a son, you know, you know, first, you know, next thing you know, I've got other girls that are interested in me, because I've actually got a half decent bodybuilding body.
Yeah.
You know, you can only imagine the, you know, how it all just went to be. And, you know, and I'm sort of doing all these, I guess, you know, I'm doing all these bad things to justify it. I'm making my wife out as if she's doing the bad things. And so, you know, I you know, for the next 10 years, it was all egotistic, drug taking, alcohol abuse, you know, it kind of just went on and on from there. So, you know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, addicts and alcoholics are great at justification.
Oh, I've heard, I've heard every justification and excuse under the sun. I think I've written a few of my own, you know.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
So obviously this went on for quite a few years. At some stage, you've made a decision to turn things around.
Yes. So I pretty much lost all. I pretty much lost all control. You know, so I was actually, I went to a few rehabs and found that the ones that I went to, that actually did supply prescription drugs didn't really work, and that was that kind of made me worse in a little way, because I'd become an egotistic con.
A minute. So you were just saying that you got to the point where you couldn't operate without drugs. So,
yeah, I couldn't operate without drugs. So whether it be prescription drugs or street drugs, I was kind of like using my addiction in any way I possibly could to replace one drug with another.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I actually got to a rehab which was advertised as get off drugs naturally, that I was able to fully detox off every prescription drug and every street drug and all the alcohol that I was consuming all at once.
Yeah.
Once I that was actually quite a lengthy program, not like just like a 1 month stint. I believe I was there for a few months.
Yeah.
And you know, like you know, it was great because, you know, I did it all naturally. I was down in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And it was in a beautiful forest area, and you know, I was away from, more so the fact that I think what was great was I was away from everybody to not sort of damage anybody anymore, which was a good thing for me, because I was so ruined, and it just felt good that I knew that I wasn't going to hurt anybody anymore. You know, though, I mean, there's been some, my withdrawal from all those drugs was nothing like what you see in the movies. It was far worse. When I see those things, especially the heroin withdrawals, you know, that's not really an exaggeration. It's pretty full on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because I was you know, in one rehab I was prescribed, because I was actually addicted to painkillers and alcohol. I was prescribed Suboxone, which is a form of methadone, to come off those, and that was a terrible withdrawal from that. And but once I got through that, I then was able to kind of start the program. I did a sauna program. They did a 1 month sauna program where you're in the sauna for like about 5 hours a day. And yeah, but you got loaded, and I mean like vitamins up to the earballs, like nutrition and vitamins up to the earballs. So talk about a withdrawal program. It was the best one that I've ever been through. And you know, but that got my life back on track. You know, my reputation was pretty ruined along the North Coast. I disconnected from all the characters, all the criminal characters, like the bikies and all that kind of stuff that I was involved with.
Yeah.
Because I really looked at myself like I was some big tough guy, you know, and so I disconnected from all those communications lines that I had with all those people. And slowly but surely, JJ, I started to really build my reputation back up to be a trusted person that I am today.
Yeah.
And the feeling of you know, of knowing that like, you know, it's I mean, I wish I could give you kind of examples of what I've done, but it's just been a very slow, gentle ease back into society over a few years to now be recognised. Actually, I do have a lot of family and friends that knew me back then, and they look at me. They kind of look at me like to say, "I can't remember you like that, mate. You know, like that guy is just. It's just like chalk and cheese. It's two different guys.
Yeah.
You know." So all the support and love that I had to get there wasn't just me, but you know, I mean, today it's just my life is just so different.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on a couple of things. So
Sure.
So obviously you've gone through rehab. You've done this amazing rehab, and then one of the things that you mentioned is that you've disconnected from people who obviously would have been bad influences in terms of drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
Which totally makes sense. Were there any other changes that you had to make? Did you have to change anything major in your life to sort of to keep yourself on the straight and narrow? Like, did you do anything new? Did you in any way sort of replace the unhealthy things you were doing with healthier things? What's kept you on track?
Yes. So I call them, some people call them triggers. Some people, like I call them re-stimulators.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm glad you asked me that question, JJ, because it's actually very important to sobriety. It's, well, for starters, on the lowest level of a trigger to the highest level of a trigger, I'll give you an example of both.
Yeah.
The lowest level of a trigger, all the music that I would listen to when I was really, when I was half cut or just totally bent out of shape, I stopped listening to because they were just triggers. So
passion.
Yeah, like you pretty much just go through. Like at the time, it was a whole CD collection.
Yeah.
I threw them out. I threw them away. And I knew that I was just lucky to know that, to listen to a whole heap of different music. But I started listening to music that was not a trigger, was not a re-stimulator.
Yeah.
So I got rid of all of that.
Yeah.
And I did mention that, look, I stopped hanging around bikies and stuff like that. But I also did have friends that really did think that I was a strong guy and still handed and offered me a beer every now and then at a barbecue. So sadly, I had to stop going to those barbecue, but my family were more important. So so that was another thing that I did. I just knew that, it sounds like a bit of a bastard act to kind of hand an alcoholic a beer. But at the same time, I don't see it that way, because I can see through their eyes that they were just trying to be a friend. Call me ignorant, but I was the one that was there at the time that they offered me the beer, and I know that with the look in their eyes, it was coming across sincere, like, we're mates, and I believe you're stronger than this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But still, I still, regardless, I wasn't going to really tackle that beast ever again, and I wasn't gonna test him out either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just gently declined the beer, and then gently started declining the text messages and phone calls and invitations. You know what I mean? I just didn't cut it off right there and stuff like that. I just phased myself out of those things, because I know my limits.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that I changed. It wasn't just going, okay, I'm not going to turn up to a bikies clubhouse anymore.
Yeah.
So, and then knowledge, reading books.
Yeah.
I started doing things that, I started actually, like I started reading books, about the things that I was really interested in.
Yeah.
And I found that just, I never really read books at school. Always had Bible studies from one book, but, I found that just, because I'd never did it, I just started doing new things and just started reading. And I found that my grammar and even education started to rise, and even my IQ. I did an IQ test, a few years ago, and then and then one recently, and it's risen by about 9 points. Which I felt was actually extremely good.
Yeah, well, I guess it's exercising your brain. I guess it computes faster. So
100%. So I mean, there are a few little successful actions as far as my sobriety was concerned, but the main one was getting myself around. I kind of like. I mean, I can categorize them in my own world as powerful people.
Yeah.
But I looked at people's lives, and if they had a good marriage, and they had a good job, and and they were happy people, they were the people that I wanted to be around, and that was the biggest thing to me. Ones that weren't mates that weren't cheating on their wives, mates that weren't even if they weren't cheating on their wives, that were sort of heading out to the pub all weekend long or whatever. It's really funny how I got my own integrity in, and I thought, I know there are a lot of good people out there that have very similar interests in martial arts and reading and knowledge and mainly also, like yourself with this podcast, want to help others. And I could honestly say they're the people I want to hang around. So I'm not surprised I'm actually on this podcast with you right now.
I'm glad you are, mate.
Thank you.
So you started educating yourself, reading. You said you started reading about things that interest you. What sorts of things did you start learning about?
I started learning about just kind of like the I guess the things that there's a lot of things that they don't teach in school, and I wanted to, especially when it comes to work, I wanted to learn about business ethics. Because the thing about it is, you can put the best office in a place, and you can put the best computers and the best software, but you're actually dealing with people, JJ. And I learn a lot about people in rehab, and so I wanted to learn that I wanted to learn how can I actually create a really good group, and really kind of like get the group on the same goal, instead of them just wanting to come to work from Monday to Friday to collect a paycheck. So I read a lot of books in relation to groups, teams, goal setting, not just from a self-determined point of view, but from an actual group member's point of view. And it's kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if Wayne Bennett's actually read the same books as I have, considering the fact that any kind of team that you put him with, he seems to kind of get them all in sync, if you know what I mean. And that's a prime example of one of the guys, I believe, that I kind of wanted to mimic, in the sense that had so much respect, got so much respect as a leader. So a lot of leadership books, and a lot of group ethics and team kind of goal driven kind of books. And I got some great information out of that, and it's not usable unless you can apply it, and otherwise it's just significance as far as I'm concerned. And I've like, you know what I mean, you've got to filter through all the significance and the things that sound good, but I'm only really after the stuff that I know that I can go to work the next day and apply it to the group members. 100%. And I found that that's been very successful, and I've gotten a lot of respect for it too. So
Mike, you and Johnny run Hibbard's.
That's right.
So Hibbard's is probably one of the bigger regional home builders in New South Wales, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So we'd easily be in the top 5 as far as the biggest regional builders. Easily, actually. It's
so big team.
Oh, big teams. Yeah, we've got. I have 35 administration staff in my group now. I love every single one of them. I know every single one of them.
Yeah.
They call me all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I've got 35 administration staff. But as you know, like we do treat our subcontractors. We have probably about 1,000 subcontractors spread across New South Wales.
Wow.
My father is a very benevolent man, always has been.
Yeah.
You know, he said to me one day, he goes, because we provide a lot of work in a lot of communities across regional New South Wales.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we just love to know that, you know, I mean, if you're a subcontractor, like a plasterer, carpenter, plumber, and so forth, and, you know, when the building industry goes through its waves, it can be really busy like it is at the moment. And then you can have next to near no work at all. But we're very proactive. So we build them before Mr. and Mrs. Jones has actually bought the house. So we funded the house to build and then sell to the real estate market. And my father said, he goes, I love knowing that there's a plumber that's got a family out there that I've actually provided a job for, you know, regardless of the fact that he's not actually on wages and I'm not paying his super, but I'm still paying his bills.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I just loved it. I loved that. And I just knew that that was actually something that, as far as his generation's concerned, it's still going to be a cultural thing within the generation between Johnny and I.
Yeah. And I think it's great that, you know, you've got 1,000 odd people involved in Hibbard's, but you're still very much a family business.
Oh yes, oh most definitely, yeah. So my grandfather started it. It's my father is still there for day-to-day operations. Obviously, he's just really mainly concerned about the board of directors and you know the profit that we make to invest back into the business to keep it operating.
Yeah.
But then there's Johnny and I, and my son and Johnny's daughter. They were born a month apart. They're 17 now, and they've just come into the business. They're doing basic clerical works, but I can honestly tell you there is a trend and a stigma out there that, you know, one man builds it up even more, and then the next generation absolutely destroys it. And that would be where Johnny and I are at, but that's not going to happen. We've kind of like totally killed that idea to the degree. And yeah, so it's definitely heading for a fourth generation family business, you know. But it's all to do with the trust and honesty and values that we really make sure stays alive within the people that are under our banner, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so the rough times that you went through, did you step away from the family business over that period of time? Or?
I had to, yeah. So I had to. So that was probably the best thing that happened for me. It was kind of like to the degree where you know, I was such a bad alcoholic that, you know, I was getting locked up a bit. And then so I ended up going to a couple of rehabs, and then the one that actually sort of fixed me up and sorted me out, I actually fell in love with all the staff there, and because I was such a good communicator and so interested in people even back then, they offered me a job. I did so well in the program, you know, because once I kind of could see that I could adopt something that I could actually use and this was going to work, like I'm 110,000% in. Like I just run with it, you know. I have always with martial arts, bodybuilding, you name it. And so then I got clean, and my father and twin brother Johnny, they were actually quite amazed and very proud that instead of me calling up and saying, okay, I'm ready to come home now, and giving them half heart attacks about the fact that, is he right? Is he not right? Is he right? You know, that I actually phoned up and I said, look, I've been offered a job here and I'm not actually ready to come home. You know, that was another thing I was going to tell you too, JJ. Environments can be a bit of a stimulator, a restimulator, a trigger as well. Certain environments, I avoided a lot of places. Just it doesn't have to have the people in them; it's the places themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and I knew that I still had a bit of a button there, and I'd been clean for a while, and I tell you what. It was the best decision I ever made, like working in the rehab, working away from the family business, because my total success came when I started actually giving back the thing that had helped me.
Yeah.
And when I saw, like, I still get Christmas cards today from the Greek families, Italian families that, they had, and they truly believe that I saved their daughters and sons' lives. They truly believe that, and there's nothing higher, there's nothing greater that I've ever experienced in my life than to be able to have that opportunity. And I'll tell you what I kept saying in the back of my mind is, out of the 80 to 100 people that I helped within that time, if they ever heard or ever found out that I actually went back to drugs and alcohol, I had too much responsibility now. I just couldn't, it would absolutely destroy me for them to ever know that I'd ever slid or slipped.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, to have that over my shoulders was the greatest pressure of my life.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you also use that as motivation as well. So
100%.
Yeah.
It just kind of pushed me more to get better and better and better. And just know, I don't have a limit anymore. I could say that I put limitations on myself, but they just do not exist in my world anymore. I've got too much to live for,
So how did you manage coming back to Coffs and,
Good question. Yeah, good question. So the good thing about it is that because we are, our family business is on a light gradient, I like to call it, but because our family business is spread out, from Taree all the way up to Grafton along the coast, and from Armidale all the way out to Dubbo, Mudgee Park, Lithgow, and all those western regions in between. I was able to post myself in a sales job in Port Macquarie, 2 hours from Coffs.
Yeah.
And just based on the environment being a bit of a trigger and a restimulator, my reputation still, no one knew what I'd been doing in Melbourne. No one knew that I'd been saving lives. No one knew that I was actually clean for a couple of years or anything like that. Yeah. And so, I was only known down there. So, because I totally cut myself off from the world, it was only my family that I was really communicating with.
Yeah.
So I moved to Port Macquarie, wasn't known in Port Macquarie, built a great reputation up with the person who I was. I worked in sales, sold a lot for the family business. And the good thing about that was, JJ, is that my family knew what I was doing in Melbourne, how well I was producing, but there was still a little bit of a, I wonder how he's going to go when he's coming back into the family business. And I was really happy that I was able to prove to them that Mike was fine.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good now. So look, I can't take all the credit, JJ. I'd been split up from my wife for, I think, about 3 years before I actually went into rehab. And one day I was working as my job as a withdrawal specialist, and this young girl, I think she could have been 20 at the time. This young girl came in and opened up the folder, read the folder. Yep, okay. Ice addict, couple of psychotic medications, right? Blah 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 blah. Did my thing. Right. Okay. Right. We're ready to go. Spent 2 weeks in seclusion with her, me as the withdrawal specialist, her as the patient. Got her off drugs, you know, got her fully off drugs. And then, you know, like she just totally brightened up. No family, no contact, no nothing. It was just a total withdrawal process. And I was the only contact that she had for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's just how it went with every single body. The reasons why I'm telling you this, because it kind of connects to my life and my sobriety and getting better.
Yep.
Then she kind of reminded me, I've got 2 stepsisters, and she kind of had personality traits of the good traits of both of them. And so, like I loved every single person that I looked after, to be honest, but she really stood out. And anyway, first visit, family came up after once they'd actually completed the withdrawal program and went up into the main program, which the withdrawal program was separated to the actual centre.
Yeah.
They could then visit family. Well, she was, she introduced me to her mum, and it was love at first sight. And so straight away, it's like, here's this emergency nurse, and she's looking at me, this guy that's just saved a daughter's life, because the difference between a drug addict that's actually gone through the whole withdrawal program, you'd think they wouldn't look different after 2 weeks, but the difference is just incredible. It's amazing the difference you see.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, next thing you know it, I wasn't even really looking for a relationship at the time. I was trying to sort myself out. You know, I was off drugs now, and had a very responsible role within the actual rehab.
Yeah.
And this lady that I'm referring to now is my wife.
Yeah.
So we got married a few years ago, and she's kind of been along my side ever since then. And you know, her daughter that I treated, is we've just become grandparents and so forth. She's been clean ever since, and that's a bit of a family kind of situation.
Wow.
But yeah, it's certainly a happy ending. You know what I mean?
What a great story. Yeah.
Yeah.